The goal is not to maintain. In fact, it's impossible to maintain. It doesn't exist. Relationships are always either growing or shrinking. If you try and maintain by default, because you're not growing it, you will shrink it. It will recede. It will go back. It will become less good than it was. And so by the very nature of trying to last for 6 months, you're guaranteed almost to have it go south. First question we have today is from someone named Nico, and he says or asks, how do I keep convos going for an extended period of time, months, because I can't meet the girl due to quarantine? Okay, thank you, Nico. I know this is something a lot of guys are dealing with. I've heard this question from various people in various sources over the past several months, so I know this is, it's a thing. It's an issue guys are having. And I understand where you're coming from. I feel for you on that question. And I'm going to help you with that situation. But what I want to point out is that the reason why you're probably having trouble, there are two reasons. One, it's a difficult thing. It is difficult, to keep things going for a long period of time over a short period of time. It's just, more shit can go wrong, right? More stuff can get in the way. But the other major issue is the way you're asking the question and the way you're thinking about the situation. So the question as posed was, how do I keep in touch with a girl, or how do I keep the girl, in contact for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months when I can't meet up with her? That's really, really tough. That's really tough because there's no incentive, right? There's very little incentive for you. You have months and months and months of work to even get to a date. And then once you get to that date, yeah, it'll be a little bit more high percentage than a normal date because there's more history built up, but not so much higher percentage, right? So the amount of effort for the result is just really not there, right? It'd be a lot easier to probably meet someone who actually lives near you and just start fresh. So even from your point of view, there's not a lot of motivation, not a lot of incentive, but especially from the girl's point of view, again, it's months and months and months. She can't see you. Where's this even going? What's the point of it? What's the purpose of it? And then also, there's guys in her area as well. So you'd have to really, really stand out. And the fact of the matter is, if you were standing out that much for this girl, you wouldn't have this problem because she'd already be chasing you. You wouldn't have this problem because she wouldn't be worried and you wouldn't be worried about how do you stay in touch. She would be worried about how do I meet up with this guy? She'd be at that stage. And that's really the answer to your question. The real answer to your question is change your goal. If your goal is it's at this mediocre level, and I want to maintain it at that mediocre level so that it doesn't backslide for the next 6 months, that's really, really hard because something mediocre actually takes a lot of energy to maintain, right? When you're interacting with someone and it's not going well, that's the hardest part. Or when it's going kind of so-so, that's the hardest part. When things are going well, it's easy, right? It's a lot easier to stay in a good relationship than it is to build a good relationship in the first place, for example. So your goal should not be to stay in contact with the girl for 6 months. If you're looking at your end objective and you're like, well, 6 months from now, I want it to be exactly how it is now. One, that's extremely demotivating for you, extremely demotivating for her. Also, though, it's just not viable, right? Because while you're maintaining a mediocre interaction, other guys near her are going to be trying to make it amazing and trying to, spark emotions and taking her on dates and things like that. It's going to eclipse whatever you can do with this mediocre focus. So I want to change your focus, okay? If you are talking to a girl from far away, here's your new focus. It's not, I want her to still be into me 6 months from now when quarantine's over. Here's what your focus is. I want her to be so into me, she would break quarantine, smuggle herself out of the country, stow away on a boat, and come meet me for a date, okay? That's the level of commitment you're going for from her. Now, is that realistic? Probably not. Like, that's some insane commitment. But that's what you're going for. Your goal is not to maintain it. Your goal is to keep making it better. The only way to maintain it actually is to keep making it better because relationships are based on trajectory. If a relationship is getting better and better and better, people want to stay in it. If a relationship's getting worse, people want to get out of it. If the relationship's just maintaining, it just gets stale, it gets boring, and it really just, tapers off. And it is possible to get these kind of crazy levels of buy-in from girls. For many, many years, I was basically traveling more than I lived in one place. I was traveling from city to city to city. I was dating multiple girls, and these girls would fly to different cities, sometimes paying their own way, in order to come hang out with me, right? So they would drop everything, fly out for a weekend to spend that weekend with me in this city, this random city, that random city, et cetera, et cetera. And that was just a normal par for the course thing that was happening all the time for me. So it is definitely possible to get this kind of level of buy-in and level of attraction from girls. And this was obviously a lot of times with girls I'd been seeing and had relationships with, but sometimes this is for girls that I had never seen, right? I meet them one night, we're texting here, there, and whatever, and then, they happen to be coming to my state, and they make a detour around to come to my city instead. They actually leave their friends, take an extra part of their trip, stay an extra day or two, come see me, etc. So people were changing their plans to come see me on a regular basis, and that's pretty normal. I even had one, it's actually not even my game was the best, but it's a good example of, the links girls will go to. I had a girl that I met her at a bar one time, and we'd been hanging out for maybe 3-4 hours at that bar, and her friends were leaving the country, right? We were in England at the time. They were going back to Germany. Her friends were leaving the country in the morning on a flight, and they're like, you have to come with us. And she's like, no, I'm staying with him. And like, you're going to miss the flight back to our country. She's like, I'll figure it out. I trust him. I'm good. I'll figure it out. And she told her friends to leave so she could go home with me that night. Right? That's the kind of level of buy-in you're looking for. Now, is that going to happen every single time? Like if you look historically at all the girls that I've had relationships with, was that what the first night looked like every single time? No, hell no. Right? A lot of times it was nowhere near that level of commitment. But again, that's the goal. That's what you're trying for. That's what you're aspiring to. Because by aspiring to that, that's when you're going to get to a relationship that maybe is not at that level, but is really, really good. Okay. So instead of thinking I'm messaging this girl and I still want to be messaging with her 6 months from now, instead think what's the next progression in the interaction? If you're messaging with this girl, the next progression, if you're far away, is let's get her on the phone. And so you're not gaming to maintain texting, you're gaming to escalate it to the phone. And then if you're on the phone, what's maybe the next thing? Escalate it to FaceTime. And then if you're from there, escalate to, a more sexual conversations with her, escalate to a more regular habitual conversation with her where it's like kind of almost a given that you're talking and more intimacy of topics and that kind of stuff, almost like having a date over the phone. And then the ultimate escalation is her making plans to come see you or you making plans to come see her. And yes, that is viable during quarantine. It has happened for a lot of my students, and I don't mean just a few, I mean a lot, right? It's funny because I hear guys complaining constantly, I can't date during quarantine. I have guys I'm working with doing both online dating and then just regular dating, a lot of online dating to be fair these days. And guys who weren't even dating that much before quarantine are suddenly going on 3 dates a week during quarantine, right? Or suddenly are having guys are having girls fly from the United States to England to go visit them. Now, obviously, that might be a little harder this week in England than it was before because there are actually some firm restrictions. But the point is, during the majority of this year, there's been tons and tons of that going on all over the world. And dating is actually more viable than you think it is if you have it in your mind that it is possible. If you have it in your mind that it's impossible and you're putting up restrictions and you're becoming a bigger objector than the girl is, then you're going to have problems with it. But I do want to point that out as well, that even nowadays, that is possible. Okay, so the goal is not to maintain. In fact, it's impossible to maintain. It doesn't exist. Relationships are always either growing or shrinking. If you try and maintain by default, because you're not growing it, you will shrink it. It will recede. It will go back. It will become less good than it was. And so by the very nature of trying to last for 6 months, you're guaranteed almost to have it go south, to have it go not so well. Whereas if you aspire to making it better and better and better, that's when you have a chance. And that's when it's actually quite possible that she actually will meet up and she'll meet up with you before quarantine's over. And if she doesn't, by the time quarantine's over, she will be dying to meet up with you and she'll be so excited. And when she does meet up with you, it will be like basically guaranteed, things are going to happen, period, no matter what, right? And I've had that as well. One thing that I would always do when I was traveling, this is a little different than specifically quarantine, but it was one thing I would do when I was traveling was I would call girls while I was traveling. And by the way, one thing I will say for messaging, the more personal the medium, the better. So FaceTime's better than phone, which is better than voice message, which is better than text message. One thing I always did, because I grew up doing game before text messaging was the biggest thing, I grew up actually having to call girls on the phone to get them on dates because text messaging literally didn't exist at the start of when I was dating. And so I had a thing that I would call phone time. I would have a period in the evening when I was learning game where I would call it phone time, and I would sit there and I would call every single number in my phone until I had talked to them or not been able to get a hold of them and I'd gone through all my numbers, or I had spent, enough time talking, like the 2 hours designated or something like that. And I just talked to as many girls as I could during that period, and the other ones were lower priority I hadn't gotten to. And that's what I would do. And one thing that I would do was these girls that are kind of like far away, or these girls that are hard to reach out to, I would do a couple different things. I would either do them as like pseudo phone time, maybe when I'm too busy to have a proper conversation like I would with a girl that I'm going to make plans with or whatever. I'd call up these girls and just chat to them while I'm running an errand or chat to them while I'm driving in my car or something like that, just to keep them kind of fresh. I'd also kind of just drop them a message when I knew that there was a message that was good. So let's say something had happened in my life that was interesting. I messaged some people about it. They thought it was cool. They thought it was interesting. They responded well to it. Well, I'd message all these girls that are my far away girls, and it would be a nice reminder to them I exist. And it's also a message that is high value and getting a good response, and it's already vetted as working. All right. The other thing you can do with these girls, because oftentimes if you have a girl who's far away and a girl who's close, you can actually go on a date with. The far away girl may be a lower priority. You can use them as like guinea pigs. You send it to them first, and if it works with them, you send it to the more high priority girls. What I actually would do in practice is I'd have kind of tiers. I would have the like pure flake girls. I'd send that first. If it got a good response with the pure flake girls, the girls I never expected to hear anything from, then I would send it to the far away girls. If it got a good response there, I'd send it to the nearby girls. In any case, it's a very low investment strategy to keep things going. But you're not just pinging random stuff. You're not just pinging stuff to ping it. You're pinging when you know it's good. You're pinging when it's a message that has gotten a good response and gotten flirtation and gotten, positive vibes from other girls in the past. But anyway, what I would do is, again, keep in touch with these girls, whether through a random text message here and there or through oftentimes just getting them on the phone. And there were girls that for, months or even up to a year, at times I would just periodically just give them a call or periodically just drop them a text. And if they were free, I would call them. And we got very used to talking. And then you better believe the next time I came to that girl's city, she was absolutely dying to see me. And it's basically a foregone conclusion. Like they just come straight over and they were just, more ready to have sex with me than you could possibly imagine. Even if the first time I met them, it wasn't even that long of an interaction or that positive interaction, because so much had been built over those months and months of just, constant small communication. But again, I wasn't doing it mainly by text message. I was doing some text messages here and there when I didn't have time, when I'm running around, or when the text message was vetted as good and wasn't a big deal. But mostly what I was doing is I was doing periodic calls. And you know what that is? That's basically the same thing you would do with a long distance girlfriend. And that's how you should be treating these girls. So I hope you enjoyed that video. By the way, the full podcast is available on all the different podcast hosts. We're on iTunes, Apple, whichever you call it. We're on Google, we're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher. Wherever you get your podcasts, any of the major places, you can go check it out there. You can also check them out at toddvdating.com on my website. They're posted on that page as well. So check out the full episodes. You're definitely going to enjoy those. And by the way, I also did just release my brand new online messaging guide. So check that out at the URL that will be either below or in the description. All right. Thanks again. Take care. Talk soon.